Sirens cut through the night as fire streaks across the sky, and in that moment, decades of quiet tension finally break into open war. It is day 25 of the 2026 conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. In Tel Aviv, families rush into reinforced shelters as the air vibrates with incoming missiles. In Tehran, the horizon flashes with explosions as power grids fail and entire districts fall into darkness. Oil burns across the Persian Gulf, sending thick black smoke into the sky, while ships freeze in place near the Strait of Hormuz, unsure if moving forward means survival or destruction. This is no longer a hidden conflict fought in shadows. It is a full-scale war, and it has been building for generations. The roots of this war stretch back decades, to a time when Iran and the United States were not enemies, but allies. In 1953, a political turning point changed the course of history when Western powers helped remove Iran's prime minister and strengthened the rule of the Shah, a leader aligned with Western interests. During this period, Iran began developing nuclear technology with American support under peaceful programs meant for energy and research. But even then, the line between peaceful nuclear use and weaponization created unease. That unease would grow into fear, and that fear would eventually turn into confrontation. Everything shifted in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution. The Shah was overthrown and a new government rose in Iran, one that rejected Western influence and viewed both the United States and Israel as adversaries. The hostage crisis that followed deepened mistrust, and the relationship between Iran and the West collapsed. In the years that followed, war between Iran and Iraq further hardened divisions, especially as the United States supported Iraq during the conflict. Over time, Iran began building influence beyond its borders, supporting armed groups across the Middle East. These alliances gave Iran reach and power, but they also made it a central focus of concern for Israel and the United States. At the center of the tension was always the nuclear question. In 2015, a temporary calm emerged when a major international agreement limited Iran's nuclear program in exchange for economic relief. For a moment, it seemed like a path toward stability. But that path fractured in 2018 when the United States withdrew from the agreement and reimposed heavy sanctions. In response, Iran increased its uranium enrichment, bringing it closer to weapons-grade levels. Iran insisted its program remained peaceful, but the United States and Israel feared a different outcome. The possibility that Iran could develop nuclear weapons became the driving force behind military planning and strategic decisions. By the mid-2020s, tensions were already boiling. Conflicts in Gaza and along Israel's northern borders intensified, with Iranian-backed groups playing a major role. Airstrikes, rocket attacks, and retaliatory operations became part of daily life in parts of the region. In 2025, a brief but intense conflict erupted after Israeli strikes targeted Iranian-linked facilities. The United States joined with powerful bunker-penetrating weapons aimed at underground nuclear sites. Although the fighting lasted less than 2 weeks, it marked a turning point. Iran's regional influence weakened, internal unrest grew, and its leadership faced increasing pressure. To outside observers, Iran appeared vulnerable. To Iran, it appeared cornered. That sense of urgency and fear led to the events of February the 28th, 2026. Before sunrise, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated strike campaign against Iran. Advanced aircraft and precision-guided missiles hit nuclear facilities, military bases, and command centers. The goal was to disable Iran's nuclear capabilities and disrupt its leadership structure. In the opening hours, key figures were killed and critical infrastructure was severely damaged. But instead of ending the threat, the strikes ignited a larger and more dangerous phase of the conflict. Iran's response came swiftly and forcefully. Hundreds of missiles and drones were launched toward Israeli cities and United States military bases across the Gulf. In Israel, the sky filled with streaks of incoming fire as air defense systems worked to intercept the barrage. Explosions echoed through urban areas, and civilians relied heavily on reinforced shelters to survive. These shelters, often built with thick concrete walls and sealed doors, became lifelines. Inside, families huddled together with water, basic supplies, and battery-powered radios, waiting for the danger to pass. In Iran, the situation was just as severe, honestly. Airstrikes disrupted electricity, communication networks, and water systems. Entire neighborhoods were left without power, forcing residents to rely on candles and small generators. Clean water became a critical concern, and people began storing whatever they could in containers, from plastic bottles to large household tanks. Boiling water or using purification tablets became essential for avoiding illness. Food supplies also became strained, leading families to ration carefully. Meals were reduced to small portions of staple foods like rice and dried grains, prepared in ways that conserved fuel and minimized waste. As the war expanded, it reached beyond the borders of the main combatants. Armed groups aligned with Iran launched attacks from neighboring countries, opening new fronts and stretching defensive systems. The United States increased its military presence, deploying naval forces and advanced missile defense systems to the region. Despite heavy damage, Iran continued to strike back, showing that even under intense pressure, it retained the ability to respond. This reality highlighted a key truth of modern warfare. Destroying infrastructure does not always eliminate a nation's capacity to fight. For civilians, survival became a daily challenge. In both urban and rural areas, people adapted quickly to changing conditions. Some fled cities to escape airstrikes, building makeshift shelters using available materials like wood, metal sheets, and fabric. These shelters were often low to the ground, designed to reduce exposure to wind and debris. Trenches were dug around them to prevent flooding and provide additional protection. In areas with limited medical access, basic first aid knowledge became critical. Stopping bleeding with pressure, keeping wounds clean, and using simple bandages often made the difference between life and death. The human cost of the war grew with each passing day. Hospitals struggled to handle the number of injured, often operating with limited supplies and staff. Communication blackouts made it difficult for families to locate loved ones or access reliable information. In Iran, internet restrictions further isolated communities, forcing people to rely on radio broadcasts and word of mouth. In Israel, constant alerts and shelter runs created a sense of exhaustion and fear, especially among children who grew up hearing the sound of sirens as a normal part of life. Beyond the battlefield, the global impact was immediate and honestly pretty severe. The disruption of oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz caused prices to surge, affecting economies all around the world. Shipping routes were delayed or rerouted, and international markets, well, they reacted with a lot of uncertainty. Governments called for restraint, but diplomatic solutions remained difficult as trust between the involved parties was, frankly, deeply broken. Each side believed it was acting in its own defense, making compromise that much harder to achieve. At its core, this war is really driven by fear and the struggle for power. The United States and Israel view Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat that, in their eyes, must be stopped at all costs. Iran, on the other hand, sees itself as resisting external control and defending its sovereignty. These opposing views, they create a cycle where each action is seen as justified by one side and aggressive by the other. In such an environment, escalation becomes, well, almost inevitable. The lessons from this conflict are honestly harsh but clear. War exposes the fragility of modern life, from infrastructure to supply chains. It shows just how quickly stability can disappear and how important preparation becomes in times of crisis. At the same time, it really reveals the strength of human resilience. Even in the face of destruction, people find ways to adapt, survive, and support one another. They build shelters from scraps, share limited resources, and care for the injured with whatever tools they have. As the conflict continues, the future remains, well, uncertain. There are signs that diplomacy could still play a role, but the path to peace is complicated by years of mistrust and recent violence. Whether this war leads to a temporary ceasefire or a longer period of instability is honestly unknown. What is certain is that its effects will be felt for years to come, shaping the region and influencing global security. The sound of sirens may eventually fade, but the lessons will remain. Understanding conflicts like this is not just about history or politics. It is about survival, awareness, and the ability to endure in the face of uncertainty. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Survival Historian for more insights into how history and endurance are deeply connected.